Hello and welcome to Medieval Knights. This video is going to be about the differences between the materials of swords. So today I've got a very common wooden sword, synthetic sword and steel sword. And I'm going to go through in a little while the pros and cons of each one and my recommendation over regular training. Obviously they're all sword shaped and sword size, so a lot of techniques shouldn't be differed, but at the same time some of them have some really good pros that I think you guys should hear. So I'm going to start this first video of the series of the Q&A by giving you my insight. So the first sword is the wooden sword. Now, all three of these swords are roughly the same style. This, as you can see, is probably more of a two-handed sword than the other two. I think the other two are more 1.5 hands, but we'll start with this one. So this one, as you can see, is all wood, and when I say it's solid wood, I do mean that it is solid. The obvious pro to having this is that wooden swords should be relatively cheap. You should be able to build them or find them pretty much anywhere, and they should be relatively inexpensive because nature grows them and we don't have to pay any money for that, apparently. So yes, inexpensive. The obvious con is that it's not that it's heavy, it's the weight distribution that's involved in it. So it has no flex. We'll talk about flex in a second. Has no flex, which the flex in itself should hold a lot of the blow. When you strike, it should hold pretty much all of that blow. If I show you on Clarence here, so when I hit, you can see that it doesn't have any flex, and actually if I do it regularly, if I keep doing it, so you can see that if I was hitting somebody's legs, that's going to hurt. It's quite a solid thing, and actually if you look at where the weight, I would say the weight wants to be just around there. Absolutely nowhere you're looking at further half down, which means that all of the weight is in this part of the blade. And when you strike with it, all of that weight goes into the strike. All of the weight goes into it. So there's no flex to absorb that. And that's what you're dealing with. So when you strike someone and you're hitting their sword and you decide to hit them, it takes a lot more to cushion that blow. It takes a lot more to hold it. And obviously, I say most people, but a lot of people tend to train in less armor, especially when they're using wooden swords, than they would normally. So if you're wearing decent armor on your legs, then these are okay. But I would also say that because of the weight distribution in the strike, it would probably do more blunt force damage than a metal or a steel sword, the same weight, simply because it's heavier. So that's the wooden sword, unfortunately. My advice straight off would be not to go with a wooden sword. It is cheaper, slightly more inexpensive, but you're not really getting much realism out of it, and I'll explain that at the end. So the second sword is obviously going the other end, what I would call the other end. It would be using a steel sword. Now the whole point of reenactment is to reenact, and people that acted used steel swords. That's what they did. They originally used steel swords. You wouldn't go into combat with a wooden sword, wouldn't do anything, it wouldn't last very long. So obviously you would go with a steel sword. Yeah, so adversely, has exactly the same striking patterns, obviously. It's a little bit less wieldy than the wooden sword. However, the weight distributes into the handle, as you can see. So you're holding the weight in your fist. The fist holds the weight. There's not really any weight in the end, not overly. The second point is that it does have, you see, it does have flex, which that is probably a heck of a lot more flex than some swords, but it has more, a lot more. Even swords that have less flex than that those swords are still going to have a little bit of give. If you watch a video of people fighting and you slow it down, you can see that their swords bend. If you slow down this one, it won't do it at all. So with this, it's the same thing as before. Steel swords are obviously what you want to be training with. If you can, when you can, play with steel. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing Viking reenactment or if you're going for War of the Roses reenactment, it makes no difference. Try to practice with steel. Obviously, and it goes without saying, but if you haven't thought about it, I'll tell you anyway, wear gloves. Wear gloves on your hands, wear head protection, and wear something thick, something like a gambeson or something. Even if that's not, or even a really thick, maybe not wool, but a really thick jumper, because when you're training, if you do, because you will, when you do get hit, you're going to feel that damage. You're going to feel it. When you've got all your armor on and all your stuff on, it's a different matter. But that doesn't matter. So, the steel sword, I would say to practice with that if and when you can. Which brings me on third and finally to the synthetic sword. It has all the benefits of one sword, and if I'm honest, it doesn't really have any of the drawbacks from the others. There is one key drawback, which I'll explain in a second. But first, with the sword, as you can see, it's light, it's quick, it doesn't strike very hard, obviously unless you do. It's got flex, it's got loads of flex in it, and these synthetic swords are very worth their money, absolutely. With this one in particular, you can unscrew the handle so it comes off there, you can pull off the hand grip if you want, take off the cross guard, and with all of those things, it means that if I've got this and I snap this bit, well, I can just buy another one of these. Or if I don't like the two-handed pommel bit, I can just buy another one and replace it. I actually have one of those pommels in the garage on my other one of these. So I have a 1.5 hand sword. You can have them made longer as a two-handed sword, which just means that you've got a longer blade. And you can make them into a one-handed sword by just having a smaller handle and smaller pommel. Absolutely great. So great. I will have a look, and the details for where you can get these synthetic swords from, I'll put in the comments below. Sorry, I'll put the information lower. Yes, so with this, it is super. The weight is where it's supposed to be, all nicely in the handle, but it doesn't weigh anything. It doesn't weigh. And therein lies the problem. The pro and the con is that it doesn't weigh anything. I mean, with this one, you could use one-handed if you wanted to, obviously. It doesn't weigh anything. So the pro, it doesn't weigh anything. You can practice with it. It's not in the way. It doesn't irritate you after you're using it. And it also means that when you're striking somebody else and you're hitting them, if you do score a strike, or even somewhere you're not supposed to strike, if you accidentally catch them on the front of their knee, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt anywhere near as much as steel, and it's not going to hurt anywhere near as much as wood, not at all. But therein lies the con. The con to this is because it's so light. If you train regularly every week or every 2 weeks, and you train just with this, you will get used to the weight. You'll get used to what you can and can't do. You'll get used to the con and the pro. You'll get used to the fact that it's so light that you can go so quick and you can strike so quick, and you can block strikes and you can deal strikes, and that's it. But when you then start using your steel sword, when you go to an event, you get all your stuff on, pick up a steel sword, and you realize that it's a bit heavier and it's got different weight distribution. And then when you're using it, you think, well, this doesn't feel right. So Therein lies the con, is that you're teaching your body and you're teaching yourself to get used to the weight of this synthetic sword. That really is the only con for the synthetic sword, that it is light, and I think that a good training sword should be a little bit heavier. But why bother? Why bother spending more money on a sword that's heavier, that you're only going to train with, and you're not going to take to an event, and you're not going to actually compete against anyone with? Not really. So, to summarise, you've got the 3 different types of sword: wood, synthetic, and obviously steel. Now, the first piece of advice, obviously, is to train with steel as much as possible. The reason, obviously, for that is that when you go to an event or you go to the thing that you're doing, you're going to be using steel. You're not going to be using your wood. They're not going to want to see that. And you're not going to be using synthetic because it's not authentic. So that's the point. I would steer clear of wood simply because it's unwieldy. And I mean that in a sense that when you strike with it, it hurts to get hit. When you hit, I mean, okay, yeah, fair enough, you get a clunk. Wood on wood sounds great. Wood tends to dent. It tends to break or burr, just like anything else, really. My advice is that synthetic doesn't. Synthetic itself, if you're training synthetic with synthetic, it doesn't. It might mark every now and again, but it's synthetic. It's plastic. You can just use a little knife to take off the little bit that's scummy. And if you need to, you can, as I said, you can change the handle, take this off, buy that, and buy a new blade. I don't know, maybe £15. Buy a new blade and keep all the other bits. You can change the bits, or if if your screw bit breaks, buy a new screw bit, buy a new one. So train as much as you possibly can with what you're going to be using, and that goes for armour as well. I'll go through this later on in another video to do with armour, but it goes without saying that if you train all the time wearing a gambeson for weeks, and then you go to an event and you decide, oh, I'm gonna wear armour, you're going to be adding a lot of new variables to your combat. Not just the fact that you weigh more, so you tire more, but the fact that sometimes, and I find this, is that when I train, I stand in a nice, controlled body. Now I find that I can't stand like this when I'm wearing the armour. You've got the armour on and you're up and you're in all enclosed, and you might fight more like this, and you strike with your arms out, because so suddenly you can't do all these really nice things that's really controlled, because taking your body and doing this to try and come up and to do just what I just did there, it becomes unwieldy with anything. So train as much as you can with the implements that you're going to be using. There's no point training with a £20 bow if you're going to go to an event and use a £45 bow. Train with the kit that you're going to be as much as possible. That's the advice. So if you're thinking about what to train with, is there a cheaper alternative to a sword, or to a style of weapon, any really, that you want, but you're not sure if you want to spend hundreds of pounds on a sword? Wood might be a good entry level just to get a feel for whether or not you like that. But if you're serious about training, I would absolutely go with a nice, decent synthetic sword. And that brings us to the end of the episode. In this episode, we've gone through the 3 different materials that you can have for a sword and what I believe is best and the reasons why. I'm going to be doing future videos on questions and answers, so if you have any questions that you'd like me to research and answer, or anything like that, and I can make videos short or long, then feel free to send them in. And obviously, if you like what you're seeing, subscribe. If you like the video, then like it, and by all means, be yourself. So until next time, thank you, and see you later.